bad I meet out in the country.
I feel like that's a big part of college or university, just kind of seeing a different place, hopefully, maybe. Not everybody does it, obviously, but I think that's a really great side benefit if possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm from Seattle, so like this was just like the Northwest with like culture. So that was really that was the reason I stayed out this way. Yeah, I was telling Brian, so this is my office, and it's converted from a 160-year-old toilet. So when we made it into an office, there was a hole in the ground, and they were like, "Do you know what it is?" And I was like, "No." And they're like, "This was the original toilet for the building." So.
And you're like, is there a message you're trying to send here? Should
well, I usually let John take care of all the technical stuff, because we had a few times where it's gone out because of my Wi-Fi. So we've upgraded a little bit now. But yeah, so I actually have to leave my door here to go into my house across the way. So we have a little cellar. We have a basement flat, and yeah, so it's a bit interesting. So everyone's always like, "Oh, your man cave's awesome," but it's literally like the size of a desk. That's about all you see here. Like John's just making everything live. Looks like we're live now, and who's gonna jump on here in a second? John, you doing okay?
Yeah, I am almost ready to go. I'm just posting this here, and pretty much good to go. How is everyone?
Very well, thanks. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing all right. Not much to say beyond that. As you guys have already mentioned, we're in lockdown now, so this is the third or fourth time we've been in full lockdown. It's tiresome, it's frustrating, but it has to be done. Let's hope this doesn't last much longer.
Agreed.
So we can get back to playing baseball.
John's really disappointed because he came out of retirement last year to play baseball, only to have lockdown happen and not be able to play at all.
Oh no.
Yeah, it's important as well though to add, Jason, that I came out of retirement after
he came out of retirement last year to play baseball.
After retiring that year. So it's not like I was out for years. I walked back out of retirement rather than coming out of retirement. But pretty frustrating.
But Brian was asking about the fields out here, and just saying that we don't basically get a flat piece of grass to play on, and that's about it.
Yeah, if we're lucky.
I feel like I was retired because I broke my ankle really badly playing softball a couple of years ago, and this was going to be my first year back, and I was really excited. But then, dun.
Well, see, we always argue that baseball and softball are socially distant sports, so we should be allowed to play.
You know, it's one of the few sports. I live in Virginia, and my kids play, and it's one of the few sports that was given the green light to be able to play, but not the schools, so not high schools, but like travel baseball. They played one of my younger sons played Little League, and then they both play travel baseball. And if you're at one of those tournaments, you would have thought it was 2019. I mean, it was literally because everybody was outside. You're so spread out that it was really, aside from maybe golf, it was one of the sports that we saw, at least. And I heard soccer and some others were able to continue like that as well for kids. But not professional, not the minor leagues, certainly.
Yeah, we'll touch about that. You can tell us your perspective on things.
We'll say we get started, Trips. Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to another NLBMArt holiday campaign webcast. I guess we would have to officially call this the last one of the holiday campaign before we move into toward the spring now. I'm John McKellar of Ballcaps and Bagpipes.
And I'm the other half of Ballcaps and Bagpipes. I screw it up every time. And yes, the owner of Dugout Classics and was involved in the thing there. And we have two exciting guests, plus Tad's come back to join us as per usual. So let's get started.
Yep. First off, Happy New Year to you guys. We're going to go around our two guests very shortly. Tad, let's go to you first off, though. How has the holiday portion of the campaign, how has it done? and what's been the kind of feedback from it?
We're still getting results back from everybody on sales, but the holiday campaign was, specifically more low key than the first campaign, right? So we didn't expect to break any records or anything like that. But what we expect, just estimating, is that the entire campaign from October through the end of the year will more than likely raise over $30,000 for the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum.
Awesome.
Really completely unexpected results. 25,000 if that was raised during the first campaign in October. So how much we do here or we have done in December, November is yet to be tallied, but certainly there's a lot of really talented people who did a lot of really cool things. 2 of them are right here, and I'm really excited to hear from them about their work and how things went.
Indeed, Tad. We'll get back to what's next toward the end of the show, but like you say, let's introduce our 2 guests. We have two people who haven't been on the show before, Jason, this week. We have Ellen Lindner and we have Brian Callahan. Ellen, let's start with you. How are you? And thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. I'm an illustrator. I really like baseball. I live in New York City. I don't leave my house much. That's about me right now.
So we talked beforehand. You said you lived in the UK for a while. You're in Manhattan, right? Does that make you a Mets fan or a Yankees fan?
Oh my God.
Or we got a fan for somewhere else?
Okay. This is gonna get bad and then it's gonna get worse. I am a Mets fan. I grew up on Long Island, which is hardcore Mets country. The worst part is that I converted my husband, who's an English person, to be a Mets fan. I brought him into a suffering group. So
Things are looking up for the Mets.
Sorry, what's that?
Things are looking up for the Mets.
Or are they? Every offseason, people say things are looking up for the Mets. It's never true.
Good owner now. Now you got an owner.
We got Bobby Axelrod.
The Mets have spent the last 50 years looking up. Their arms are too short to box with God when it comes to.
So I have to say, this was a loaded question.
Tyrannosaurus Rex arm. No. Yeah, basically. But yeah, maybe. I mean,
this was a loaded question because John's a big Yankee fan.
You know what? We can coexist peacefully. And Brian is, a real baseball expert. So if he says things are looking up, I believe it.
I think they are. I think it's good. It's as promising as it's looked in a long time for Mets fans. And I'm a Yankees fan. So
hey,
outnumbered. Is this an ambush? Is this an attack?
I'll be fair, Ellen. We're side on your side because me and Tad are Mariners fans, and we wouldn't have Kelenic if it wasn't for the Mets. So
Okay. I thought this was like an enemy of my enemy is my friend thing, but if you're just going to talk about that, then I don't want to hear about it.
Okay, we won't talk about that. We won't bring that up.
Every
Brian,
time I see Edwin Diaz, I cry. Sorry, what's that?
Brian, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. My name is Brian Callahan, and I live in Richmond, Virginia. I'm originally from New Jersey, and I've been in the baseball business now for the actual business of baseball, minor league baseball, since 2010. A lifelong baseball fan, and then I just got back as a hobby into drawing and illustrating. As I had an iPad and I saw you could do some things that were a little quicker than the traditional mediums. And so I just got back into it and kind of been able to marry the 2 of them, and was fortunate to kind of come across the right people. Tad had this great vision, and so had a lot of fun, and was really proud to be a part of what we all did collectively here this fall and winter season.
So Jason, I know that you're itching and chomping at the bit to ask Brian this, so why don't we start off with Brian by asking about owning a minor league baseball team?
Yeah.
I think there's one particular question that Jason would like to ask. So Jason, I'll give you the pleasure here.
I'm curious what question you think it is. I got plenty of questions for Brian. So
I think the ultimate one the one that we pondered previously when we spoke to an ex-minor league player was what are your thoughts and feelings on the changes, let's say, that have been made to the minor league setup in the last year or so?
It's been really rough, to say the least. So, and as background, I think it's important to kind of understand the relationship between Major League Baseball and minor league baseball, which is essentially you have this longstanding agreement. It was called the PBA, and the PBA established the terms where basically the major league team provides the players and coaches, and then we sell beer and hot dogs and tickets and do zany stuff in between innings. And Major League Baseball wanted to see some big changes happen, and that included eliminating 42 teams from the minor leagues out of basically around 160 in the United States. And that was kind of their first initial volley. And what's really transpired, throughout the minors this past year, on top of COVID, which meant there was no season, and minor league baseball is a turnstile business. So, you're charging $8 for tickets and you're selling $2 hot dogs, and the beers are $10, but the hot dogs are $2. But nobody shows up, you have no business, you have no revenue. And on top of that, Major League Baseball essentially crushed the infrastructure of minor league baseball and eliminated 42 teams. That's basically 42 cities that probably got behind taxpayer-funded ballparks or bonds, and now don't have any team to play. So it's been really tough. The two teams that I'm involved with, one in here in Richmond where I live, which is AA for the San Francisco Giants, and then also in Omaha, Nebraska, we are AAA for the Kansas City Royals. We're fine in the sense that, we have a team, we have an affiliation. What we don't know in the minor leagues right now is the details of this new agreement with Major League Baseball. And they really hold all the cards. And so that's a long-winded way of basically saying it's been really challenging, been really tough. So, and we're still learning. We still don't know all the details about the terms of the new arrangement.
So Brian, what does this mean in real terms for the players, yourself, people involved at the ballpark as employees? Obviously this past year and moving forward, how much of a worry is it?
So there's two parts to that. One is the players themselves, they're the employees of the major league team. So for the minor league guys, unless they were in that let's call it like an elite group that went to those satellite, those taxi camps, they just didn't play. And there's an additional dynamic with the players that is really a fundamental wrong of the game, which is these minor league guys make almost no money, and they're not our employees. So it's something that we, as an owner, I look at and I just think it's kind of remarkable that Major League Baseball has been able to get away with it, and they're trying to, fix it, but not really. They're trying to pay these guys more. But those guys with no season, that they just didn't play. They go back to doing whatever they do. For our folks here locally in town, a minor league baseball team is a small business. So I'll give you just some rough numbers. So in Richmond, we have roughly 25 full-time employees. And during the season, you'll have anywhere from 300 to 400 part-time employees that are working concessions and, that type of thing. And but like any small business, we had zero revenue. We applied for PPP, and you try to avoid a capital call, but they happened all across minor league baseball. And, employees got furloughed. We're probably operating at half staff, things like that are really tough, because the people that choose to work in minor league baseball, they're not doing it to get rich. So they're doing it because they love the game. They want to be around. They want to be in professional sports. But they put in incredible hours and not for a lot of money. And I wish it was otherwise, but the beauty in the minor leagues, at least, is that, a family of four can come to a minor league game for less than it costs to go to the movies. And when you think about what it costs to go to a major league game, it's a big gap there. I'm really proud. I really love what the minor leagues represent in that sense, but it makes it really tough when you have a pandemic and then you have a partner, and they're not all bad, but they're let's call them heavy-handed in Major League Baseball. And so we're trying to sort through it. I think we'll get through it, but it's been really tough, especially for the folks that's their job. That's what they do. That's how they support their families.
So interesting. I wasn't asked that question, but I actually have two questions, and then let's focus on the arc for Brian. So Brian, what's been your favorite promotion? And the second question is, what was it like working with Brandeis to develop the brand?
Favorite promotion for the minor league teams that we've done, like at the ballpark?
Absolutely. Yep.
There's a bunch of really good ones. I'd say a couple of my favorite, the human cannonball is unbelievable. If you pull it up on YouTube, the human cannonball, because the guy goes around to all these different parks. It's pretty incredible. And then I'd say maybe a couple honorable mentions after that is cowboy monkeys. They have these monkeys and they ride dogs around the ballpark dressed as cowboys. And it's just, I don't know, never stops being funny. And we did a Field of Dreams one time where in Richmond, they put all these, they brought in all these corn stalks. We set them up in the outfield, and that's how the players came onto the field that night.
Wow.
And it was really, really cool. And so I really, those are my favorite promotions. I don't know if those are a second, was there a second part to that question there?
No, I was curious because I'm a big fan of branding. So working with Brandeis to develop the brand of the Flying Squirrels. I was just curious how that process went and how was you there. And then we'll talk about your art, because I said that I've been following them for years on Instagram, and so whenever they came up with the new minor league team, it's always cool to see the process behind it.
So I wasn't as close to kind of the interacting with them. I was in the ownership group, but our guys are the actual full-time employees that were handling all that. I saw the results, and it was really, they're amazing. I mean, they do a lot of these, and what they did was they came into town and they really kind of get a feel for the town. And I remember them saying, like, here in Richmond, it's an old town, a lot of brick. There you go, human cannonball. There's a lot of brick, and so they wanted the red. They wanted this brick feel, and a lot of as a kind of as a complementary color. They wanted black to go along with it, and so that was how they kind of picked the color scheme. And then they had like a name the team contest, and I forget how the Flying Squirrels came about. It wasn't like a fan vote, but they came up with a logo, and it actually ended up looking kind of like the state of Virginia, the outline of Virginia. I can't remember if they did that intentionally, but if it wasn't, it was brilliant mistake. So, but those guys are really, really talented, and they do a lot of teams.
I'm a hat collector, so I have over 100 hats. So when the minor leagues exploded with all these new branding like that, they were the people that seemed to be behind it all. So, I own quite a few minor league hats because of them.
And you see, like here on my wall, I don't know if you can see that I'm pointing to. These. So all the minor leagues do this thing called Copa de la Diversion, which is basically they created a Latino alter ego, and every team in the minors did it. And it's some of the coolest stuff. I have a bunch of hats from teams that I don't even own, and I'm such a big fan of it. And they had a lot to do with this too, I believe. But if you're a fan of kind of just unique, different, stylish, cool hats and logos, that it's commonly just called the Copa line of stuff that the minor leagues did. It's fantastic. And when you think about it, it was just an awesome way to honor and represent. There you go. To honor
Aqua Sox. I know, I recognize that
part
one.
of the game. This huge population, not only in America, but you know, in other parts of the world as well. So
Cool. All right, John, you want to take back over? I got my questions and I'm good.
Would you like to touch base with Ellen, or do you want to?
We'll talk with Ellen here. We'll go back and forth there, so we don't want to feel left out there.
Yeah.
I know
So Ellen,
I know you're discriminating because you're the Mets fan, but you gotta interview her too.
At least that's out on the table. I'm really glad.
Incidentally,
Thank you for your honesty.
Incidentally, we have a comment from Graham Nelson on the stream to just let us know that there's a +1 for the Yankees fans as well. So that's another one. We're taking over tonight.
I think it might be like a secret Yankees fan. Like my neighborhood is so Yankees focused. Although to go back to what you guys were saying about the world of baseball, I live in Washington Heights, and you're as likely to see a Dominican League hat here as you are to see an MLB or minor league hat. So yay for the world of baseball. But was there a question, Yankees fan?
So Ellen, you're a cartoonist, an illustrator, educator, and editor, and you're the author of 2 graphic novels. You're most notably the author of The Cranklets Chronicle. Am I correct in saying that?
Sure.
Would you like to tell us about that and how that came about, what the feedback's been like?
Oh, wow. That's a really interesting and far-reaching question. Thank you, John.
Making up for it.
So when I came back to New York after living in London for a really long time, it was kind of like I rediscovered a lot of stuff that previously I might have taken for granted. And I've been a Mets fan my whole life, but while I was in the UK, that was kind of on the low-key side. It was on the DL. Mostly because I didn't know that many people who are even that into baseball. You guys are exceptions, although there are some cool baseball cartoonists in the UK.
Which one do you like? There's 2 I know of.
Okay, let's see. Who are you thinking of? Samuel Williams, maybe?
Ah, yeah, Samuel Williams. Yeah.
I actually also really like Olivia Hicks.
Oh, I don't know Olivia Hicks. I was thinking Tim Godden.
Oh, okay. They're multiplying. They're out there. So when I came back to New York and could go to games again, I kind of got back in touch with my baseball fandom. But when you're an adult, you see the game differently from when you're a kid. And sort of to go back to what Brian was saying about the way the majors treat the minors, which is a scandal, by the way. Although it's been withheld by the Supreme Court multiple times. It's so crazy. It is really unfortunate.
the minors, they sued to be paid minimum wage. That's the lawsuit. They were suing.
Not even that. It's really, I'm completely on the player side in this. It's really an appalling state of affairs. Baseball basically has a labor law exemption, so they can pay below minimum wage in the minor leagues, and it's really absurd. So that's one example of a situation where baseball is a little screwy. But I had a conversation once with a friend of mine who doesn't like baseball, who is a woman. And she was like, well, don't you think it's really sexist? And I was like, I don't think so. I mean, I feel kind of, and then I was like, hold on. Only men play pro baseball in the US. So that is a little sexist. So I basically started researching the history of women in baseball, which is something I'd never thought about. It had never even seemed strange to me that the only people I'd ever seen play professional baseball as an American were men. That never even occurred to me until I had this conversation with my friend, who is the girlfriend of a long-suffering Mariners fan. So maybe he annoyed her a little bit on that count. So basically, I started digging into the history a little bit, and there was a lot of stuff I just didn't know anything about. So I was coming into it completely cold, and so I decided to address this issue the way I address a lot of things that confuse me, which is to make a comic about it. And so the first comic I made was about a piece of baseball history and a piece of New York history, which I did not know anything about, which was the departure of the then New York Giants and the Brooklyn Dodgers to go to California in the late 50s, in 1957. So in 1957, New York City went from having 3 baseball teams, the Yankees, which I know at least some of you have heard of, the Giants and the Dodgers, in addition to black baseball teams. So I'm just talking about Major League just for the moment. And so overnight it went from having 3 Major League teams to only having 1. And the only person on the Giants board who voted against taking the team to California was a woman I'd never heard of named Joan Whitney Payson. She was a minority shareholder of the New York Giants. She had been a lifelong super fan. She went to a zillion games. They used to play in my neighborhood, by the way, at the unfortunately now very much demolished Polo Grounds. And so she was the only person out of this whole board who you'd think loved the team, wanted to keep them in New York City. She was alone. And I found that to be really fascinating. New York City at that time was going through a period of, let's say, adjustment. It was kind of on the decline as a shipping port. And at that point, it hadn't really transformed into the modern city it is today, which has a lot of different industries. And so people just thought big cities on the East Coast were over and the West Coast was the future. And so basically, I didn't know this, but then she bankrolled the founding of the New York Mets. And I became so interested in her history. So for the first issue of Cranklets Chronicle, I did a story about Joan Whitney Payson and how she stuck with the Mets during some of the worst losing seasons in Major League history, and eventually became a World Series winner in 1969. And then for the second issue, I thought, well, there's only one woman in the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame, so I have to do a story about her. And I thought this would be really straightforward. I was like, cool, okay, I'm interested in the world of Black baseball. I think the Negro Leagues were really interesting, but I don't know that much about them. So I obviously have to do a lot of research. But I took for granted certain things about Effa Manley that turned out not to be entirely true. She has a very complicated personal history, which I had no idea about. Basically, she grew up thinking she was African-American, and then found out as a teenager that the person who she thought was her father, who was a Black man, was not her father. But by that time, she had lived as a Black person in America for 16 years. And so she was in a very strange position where she could either leave her family and essentially live as a white person, or she could embrace her African-American, I don't want to say heritage, but the sort of cultural environment in which she'd grown up, which was basically an African-American neighborhood in Philadelphia, and live that life. And in the end, she became, she was married to, she grew up, she became an adult, she married an African-American man named Abe Manley, and she became a basically baseball baroness. She led a team called the New York Eagles with her husband. They were very successful, and they ended up winning the Negro Leagues World Series. But then they collided with a huge historical force, which was the desegregation of Major League Baseball. And so all of a sudden, their players who for years had been shunned by Major League Baseball, they'd been told, you know, you can't try out, you can't be a part of this team. And of course, I mean, I don't know how much people know about it in the UK, but basically for years, no one in Major League Baseball would say that African-Americans are banned. The commissioner would say it's the decision of the managers. The manager would say it's the decision of the general manager. The general manager would say, I can't do anything without the commissioner. And so basically it was a strange situation where nobody would admit that there was this law in place in Major League Baseball, but there was. And so in the mid-1940s, right after World War II, New York State changed its labor laws so that you could not discriminate on the basis of race in New York State. And Bran Trickey, who is the pioneering owner and general manager of the Brooklyn Dodgers, actually I should say general manager, he said, okay, well, I've been wanting to recruit players from the Negro Leagues for years. No one can tell me I can't do this now because it's the law in my state. The Brooklyn Dodgers were subject to the laws of New York State, and he couldn't justify any longer discriminating against Black players. But as we all know, that led to basically the cratering of the Negro Leagues as Major League Baseball kind of lured players from the Negro Leagues to the majors. So it's a really fascinating story. I did not know any of this when I got started. So this was a huge learning process for me. And so, and that's how I eventually got in touch with Ted through a lovely person who we both know named Anika Orrock, who's a fantastic baseball author and illustrator. And so, yeah, so that is my story.
So I've got an interesting one for you. There's a UK woman in the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Sorry, what's that? I'm so
there's a British woman in the Baseball Hall of Fame. So there's two people in the Hall of Fame.
Who's that? I honestly don't know what you're talking about.
That's all right. It's fine. It's pretty obscure, so you wouldn't actually know about it. But her name is Margaret Borley, and she started the baseball team in Tunbridge like 75 years ago. She's become knighted for it, and she signed to baseball for baseball around the world. That's played in the Hall of Fame.
Oh, that's fantastic. So she's a dame?
I guess, yeah, that's correct. She just got it recently, like the last year or two. So, yeah.
Oh, wow, you're blowing my mind.
Yes, it was only because it came up recently because someone had said that, and it was like, oh, it's actually pretty cool because she was one of the, I mean, she started this 60, 70 years ago in Tunbridge. So, you know, it would have been pretty obscure. It's obscure now, but it would have been even more obscure back then.
Oh, yeah. Well, I guess when I'm talking about F. Manley, she's the only person who's enshrined in the hall as
enshrined in the Hall of Fame. Yeah. We're splitting hairs here, but yeah, I thought I would throw that fact in there.
There was a period where the hall basically decided to make up for decades of lost time and brought in, I think, two main groups of players and managers from the Negro Leagues. And so basically, that's when F. Manley was brought in.
Yeah, Thurman Munson still isn't fucking in, though, is he? But that's
you're gonna have to write a letter to the editor about that one.
I think I'm going to have to. It's a sham, so it is a sham, I say.
Send a telegraph.
Ellen, it's really interesting that you mentioned the unintended consequence of breaking the colour barrier, which was the kind of gouging out of the best talent from the Negro Leagues, and obviously with Brian, you being on, and seeing the impact that Major League Baseball has on minor league baseball just in the last year. And it's just a kind of like, it starts to show a bit of a pattern, doesn't it? Brian, what is it you think about?
I agree.
What is it you think Major League Baseball should be doing differently in its approach to other leagues and the way it does business, instead of kind of steamrolling over, whether it be the Negro Leagues back then or the minor league system now? And what do they need to put into place to ensure that baseball, not just at the major league level, thrives, but at every other level below? Because obviously, without every other level below, without the pyramid, you can't have the top bit, and it's only the guys in the top part that get all the kind of great money and all the perks and stuff like that. Whereas it's the work that everyone puts in from the ground up that sends them there. What should they be doing differently, in your opinion?
This might be wishful thinking, but I do think that the minor league players, they should be able to earn a living, and I think they'd still be incentivized to want to get to the next level. And mind you, this isn't necessarily the owners that are blocking this. The most powerful union that I know of is the Major League Baseball Players Association. And if they wanted the minor league players to have a greater cut, they could do that tomorrow, but they don't. Their response would be, if you don't like it, play better. And so what happens is you have all the, these guys who make incredible livings, generational type of wealth, playing at the highest levels of the game. And then you have this whole, really the larger part of the pyramid that, quickly discovers they either go up or they get out. And so I think there's something there, but I do think the biggest thing about Major League Baseball that I personally would love to see change would be, I think that they've priced out the average family. They've priced out the middle class. It's become too corporate, and maybe it's a financial economic kind of machine that they don't know how to turn back from it. But I think that's a shame. I think, if a family wants to go and it's going to cost them $400 or $500 to take their kids to a game, and they can only do it, once a year, something like that, I think it's a real shame. And I also think that's one of the beauties of the minor leagues, is that it provides it. So I further think on that point that eliminating baseball, professional baseball, affiliated professional baseball in 42 markets, while maybe it makes economic sense, I heard that each major league team is going to save about $1 million. I think if you're the commissioner of baseball, you have a responsibility to be a steward for the game. And that means making sure that kids growing up in all parts of the country where these are usually typically more rural markets that are getting eliminated. Those kids, most of them won't get a chance to see what a 90-mile-an-hour fastball or 95-mile-an-hour fastball looks like live in person. And I just think that there's something wrong with that. And so I understand why they make some of the decisions and some of the dollars that are at stake. I disagree with it. I do think I will give them credit and say, I do think finally recognizing the Negro Leagues as major leaguers was right, long past due, but better late than never, I guess, is the best thing to say. So I'm very encouraged with that.
Now, you mentioned, Brian, that the average Major League team is saving roughly $1 million from that. I think it's important to put that into perspective when you look at a Major League team's budget. $1 million wouldn't pay Bobby Bonilla for the year. Never mind anything else, it's not it's a drop in
I
the
didn't even
ocean.
realize I was still muted while I was screaming in rage. How dare you, sir? How dare you?
Hey, listen, I have to say, I love Bobby Bonilla. I love Bobby Bonilla to bits, and we'll get into that later. But
sure. But it's true. It's true. It's nothing for them. It really is not very much. And I think that's an interesting perspective that Brian brought up, that the players union does have a big say in this, and that they're essentially not speaking out for people who are on their way up, many of whom are exploited in many different ways at different stages of their baseball career, just on the chance of making the majors. So I completely agree that in a world where it wouldn't even pay Bobby Bonilla, can we really justify that $1 million savings?
Yeah, I mean, that $1 million, how many people's salary would that pay for the year?
For the Rays, half of them.
But for minor league,
off. Oh, it makes me so sad to see that team get dismantled. But
yeah. So what Major League Baseball wants to accomplish by all these moves, by trimming down the minor leagues, is they want to limit the amount of travel. So they're reorganizing the leagues so that teams are closer, and they do want to pay them more. It's still not what it should be, in my view, but they are making some effort in fairness. It's just not, everything's about degrees, right? So is it enough? I'm not sure that it is, but they want better facilities, they want better food, they want an easier schedule. There's a bunch of things that they want that are around player development so some of which are good, but there's still a big opportunity there.
Yeah.
I'm only laughing at sorry, Tad looked a little indignant about the food comment. I agree.
I was going to say, Tad, I think you wanted to say something.
Well, yeah, the question that I actually had is, Brian, related to Major League Baseball's decision to include the Negro Leagues officially within their statistics. I can't help but think that there's another shoe going to drop at some point, and we're going to find out why they've done that. And it's, knowing Major League Baseball, there's got to be some kind of financial incentive for them to do anything at this point. So any decision they make seems to me that it's got to be financially motivated. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you're probably right, and it's probably as simple as responding to the social pressure that, it's not just about what was going on with the Negro Leagues and some of the pieces. I think, Tad, you'd seen that same piece I saw about the gentleman that was compiling the stats and proving their value, but also everything that went on in the United States this year. I think they wanted to be on the right side of that. And you could, be a little cynical about, shouldn't you have been on the right side of it all along? But regardless, it shows that, if enough people care about an issue, you can move the needle and you can eventually bring about some of the change, that you need in there. So
I hope it's benevolent.
Yeah, I feel like we need to put a pin in that and check back in a couple of years and see what's up. Because I'm also very curious.
Right.
Listen,
Well,
you-
as an example, the Homestead Grays, my understanding is Homestead Grays imaging, logo, everything is public domain.
That actually occurred to me because merch is like one of the big preoccupations on their minds. And
Right.
and once they've incorporated the Negro Leagues into MLB in some way, the merch, I just don't want to see a recap of what happened the first time where they kind of like take people who've been making money, people in the Black community who've been making money off of selling Negro Leagues merchandise for generations, and now Major League Baseball is going to co-opt that. Like that's going to be, basically the same thing all over again. So I hope it's not that, but I do have my suspicions.
I hope you're right too. One of the other things that exists in the game, if you kind of look at the game broadly, in my view, and think, what's fundamentally right, what's fundamentally wrong. One of the things that's clearly amiss is the makeup of the league is so different than when we were growing up. And, Tad, I think you and I are roughly the same age, and you look back to, the Pirates and these teams, but you basically had Major League Baseball looked like the general population. It was probably roughly 14% African-American, United U.S. citizens, right? So not including some of the Latino population that came in and other people of color. And now that number is, I don't know, I want to say it's 6-7%, but it's stunning. And I don't think it's something that's intentional, but I do think it's something that needs to be addressed when you consider, what the game means, what the game can bring to a lot of kids out there. There's no CTE in baseball. And I can tell you as a youth coach, I coached youth football for years and as well as travel baseball. And, when we go and show up with our, 20 kids and we go play, in parts of town that, are economically depressed parts of town, they'll have 50 kids on the sideline in football. And then you'll play that game on a Saturday, and then you'll take your kids and play a travel baseball tournament on Sunday. And you can count on one hand the number of African-American kids you'll see at the entire tournament. And there's just something is wrong. And Major League Baseball has a program called RBI, returning baseball to the inner cities. But it's not moving the needle. We're not getting it done. So I think if they really want to get on board and kind of and honor the heritage of all these people, the importance to the game, to everybody, honestly, it wasn't just African Americans who appreciated these players. This is, I think that's something that's really missing and it needs to be addressed.
Yeah, and I'd like to give a shout out to Curtis Granderson, who's been a really great activist for growing the sport amongst young African-American kids in his hometown of Chicago. Yankee and Met.
Yep.
Curtis Granderson. But it's so frustrating. I mean, I might not be as young as you guys think I am. I mean, like the Mets team I grew up with had a lot of African-American stars on it. And yeah, it's really changed, and that's sad. I mean, like around New York City, just in terms of anecdotal evidence, you see a lot of really disused ballparks that, like even 15 years ago would have been in use. And I mean, stuff like travel baseball is fantastic if you can afford it, but it is pretty expensive. And if you don't have any extra income, especially now that we're kind of going through a huge economic crisis at the same time as we're going through a public health crisis. So it's super concerning. I mean, I obviously things change, and that's fine. But the statistical drop in the number of African Americans in Major League Baseball is huge relative to.
Here's an interesting take. I had a guy that here locally, African American guy. He grew up in Los Angeles and played a little bit of pro ball in the minor leagues, and he runs an academy. And I was having a cup of coffee with him one day, and we were talking about this exact thing. And I said, "What do you think it is?" And he said, "I'll tell you exactly what I think it is." He said, "Title IX." And he said, what Title IX did in college athletics was it limited the number of scholarships that sports could offer. And so while creating equality, that's what Title IX was about, creating equality amongst the sexes, what it inadvertently did was it left full ride scholarships as an opportunity in baseball on the outside looking in. So on a collegiate baseball team, there's usually 35 kids on the roster, and they have, roughly 11 and a half scholarships to divvy up. But if you play football, you have 85 full ride scholarships to offer. In basketball, you have I think it's 12 full ride scholarships. So the way out, if you're coming from any economically depressed area, and it doesn't have to be African American, it could be a kid, it could be a redneck kid in the hollers of West Virginia. But it's limited in terms of what the sport does at the collegiate level to go get an education. And he said, that's what happens. That's these kids, they want to go get an education, go play football, go play basketball. There's no money in baseball. You're not going to get a full ride unless, you're the next Alex Rodriguez or something. So.
I mean, I hear you, but I feel like that's also a change in the sport as well. Like players who I really loved, like Dwight Gooden or Mookie Wilson, didn't go to college at all. It used to be that you were scouted out of high school. So that's also a change in American society. Like I hate putting it on Title IX because
I'm not
if I can put a sidebar in here, my brother went to Virginia Tech like Brian and ran track, and he used to bitch about Title IX all the time. So I've heard it all.
Right. But what
I've heard it all of it.
An unintended consequence was scholarships weren't there, and then when you go look back down about where are you going to put your time and effort as a youth player or a high school player, it became you can get a full ride, get your education paid for if you play football well enough. You can get a full ride if you play basketball well enough. If you play baseball great, unless you're going to get drafted, and you're getting drafted out of high school, I mean, you are really good. But what if you're just very good, and you can play in college? Well, you have to pay, the lion's share of your education if you're a baseball player.
Yeah, but like once again, I'm just gonna say that like it didn't used to be as expensive to go to college in the United States, so that's another like social change that's been huge. Title IX has done so much good. I really hate to kind of malign it without having a lot more statistical basis.
So I don't want to come across as being anti-Title IX because I'm certainly not. Let's just say this: there aren't scholarships in baseball. So however you want to.
Okay. I can get it. I can get on board with that. There's just been so many changes in the way that Americans view education. I mean, it didn't used to be that you had to get a college education, and certainly not if you were an athlete. It was rare that someone like Jackie Robinson would be, a 3-sport athlete in college. A lot of people wouldn't even bother finishing high school if they were any good at baseball. So it's a larger sea change. I totally hear you. But also I feel that like baseball, when you diminish things like the minor leagues, there's just fewer opportunities to play. And so there are fewer spots and fewer people can take those spots. And so basically, I feel like there are a lot of different forces. I mean, when we're talking about an era where there was the Negro Leagues, when there was major leagues, the Pacific Coast League, leagues in Mexico, there was just a lot more opportunities for people in North America to play baseball. And so that's been a big change as well, in my opinion.
It'll be really interesting when all this was happening in the minor leagues with Major League Baseball. It was there was a dynamic that I thought probably hasn't been around for a long time, which was, and I remember thinking, if you get enough of these folks, and you know, people that own minor league teams aren't all millionaires, but they're all typically going to be affluent to some degree. But people that own major league teams are typically going to be billionaires or groups of mega millionaires. And it was a little bit of like, if the billionaires push out enough of the millionaires, they may all get together and form a league akin to what like the Mexican League is. Like, you know, players that go to the Mexican League, we've had players play for us here in Richmond, and when their career ends at AA, they can't get past, they go down and play in the Mexican League, and they can actually make a, you know, pretty good living doing that. I mean, and they're not making millions of dollars. Maybe they're making 80,000, 100,000, 120,000, but that's a good living. And it felt like there was a chance that something like that could come about. And if it did, what it would trigger would be this, what's the phrase for the antitrust exemption that Major League Baseball has, which is basically to say that baseball cannot be held accountable in the United States. If you have a monopoly, it can be broken up, right? It's you cannot monopolize any industry except baseball. Baseball has antitrust exemption, which means they can rule over and crush other leagues and everything. And I don't think they've really had that put to the test and kind of seen what that would do to them economically. But if a league like that sprouted up, to your point, you're going to have a lot of really talented baseball players who can play professional baseball, maybe not at the major leagues, but really, really talented folks that are capable. They're going to be cast out there. And if the independent leagues got big enough and Major League Baseball did anything to get in their way, they would be taken to task, and they could lose that exemption. Think of it almost as like the XFL and the NFL, right? So you could have a competing league come up. It would be really, really interesting to see. And I know for sure there's 42 teams with 42 sets of owners that are not too thrilled with the way things have happened. And so I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not saying it will happen. I just say it's interesting time to think that it could happen.
All right, well, this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation. But Brian, we brought you on about your art. Let's talk about your art for a little bit.
So the art thing for me is, you know, I did it as a kid. I like every kid, I was out there playing sports and hanging with my friends. And instead of taking piano lessons, my mom sent me to this lady that lived in our neighborhood. She was an artist, and I took art lessons. And so I would go like once a week for, I don't know, a few years when I was 8, 9, 10, 11, something like that. And I kind of did it through, you know, here and there through high school. And then I kind of just put it down, and I would only occasionally pick it up to, you know, draw a cartoon or just kind of mess around. And I just picked it back up, you know, maybe it was like probably about 2 years ago now. And I had seen with where the Apple Pencil and iPads had gotten, I started messing around with an app and saw how quick and easy it was. And I have 5 kids, and, you know, life is kind of, you know, going at 100 miles an hour. So I didn't have a lot of time, and I started messing around. I really got into it. And then I said, what should I do? What should I practice on? I didn't kind of know what subject, you know, to do. And I ended up picking up a bunch of baseball cards, actually. Stack them here, keep them all here. Like I had an old box of baseball cards, including a lot of the ones from, you know, for me as a kid were like, you know, so critical growing up, 1978 cards, these Topps cards. So I was like, I'm just going to start drawing some of these just to practice. And I did, and got it going. And then after I'd done a whole bunch of them, I posted it like on Facebook to my friends and got a lot of really positive feedback. And then I posted it like another batch a little later. And I think all my friends were like, we got it, dude. Like, we get it. You like to draw. And so I thought, oh, it's probably not the best forum because not all of them like baseball and everything. So I hopped on Instagram a little over a year ago and just started posting them, and just found there's this really great community of folks that just love the pageantry of the game that gets represented in different, art forms. And so just contributing to that, I was fortunate. I promoted a few pieces just to kind of see if, that there was an audience for it, and there was. And so it's been a lot of fun, and I've stuck to it. The iPad is, it's so time efficient for me. And that I love it. Although I do want to get away. When I look at folks like Greg Krindler and James Bennett and gosh, some of these fine artists that are out there, there's a bunch of them that were involved in this thing. They're amazing. And I'd love to be able to do what they do in the medium that they do. I just haven't committed the time to do it yet. But in the meantime, I just try and post. I saw you had the Bo Jackson there today. I just, I'll get up and I keep a running list of people and plays and places. I love doing ballparks as well. And just, whatever I'm feeling like. And then the greatest project that I got involved with, Tad, was the one that you helped organize to do this. That was, I learned so much. Honestly, Ellen, just like you, I was kind of researching these folks. I looked at it and I said, all right, well, what do I do? Because I don't have an actual painting. I'm not going to paint on a canvas, an original piece. It's a digital piece of work. So what would be a good format? And then I thought, if I put together a little like booklet, maybe that would be it. And then I poked around. I realized there was 41 people who were enshrined in Cooperstown that were associated with the Negro Leagues, either as players or executives. And I decided to do a booklet of that, including, there you go, F.A. Manley. And it was really fascinating because as I would do each one, I would learn about them and look at the different photos, and gave me a really deep appreciation for, not just the amazing and talented folks that were there, but just, the stories behind it. And it's just, it blows your mind. I mean, really, you look back, I'm sure you all feel the same way. You kind of look back and you just think, how did it even happen that, we saw it that way? And maybe it's a good thing that our kids are growing up now thinking that way, because I know my kids look at it that way. And, but it was a lot of fun to do. I was really honored to be a part of it, and hopefully represent some of those folks in a way that was colorful and brought them to life. And it was certainly fun to do.
Brian, I just got to tell you, well, first of all, that was a great compliment. This campaign did so well in bringing people together. And truly, I think when you talk to everyone, that's the thing that people call out first, is the community aspect. But I'll say I split my time between Eastern Washington and the Seattle area. In Eastern Washington, where I live, is Cheney, which is just outside of Spokane. It's a very small farm town. It's where Eastern Washington University is. But it is a tremendously homogeneous white community. And there's a guy, man, I get all choked up thinking about this, but there's a guy that I grew up in Little League with there. I got involved in the Little League board there in 2006. And he was a guy who took me under his wing. He had an older kid who'd been in the league for a few years. And he put his youngest son on my team, my T-ball, my very first T-ball team. And I coached him, I think, for his first 3 or 4 years. And probably about that length of time, 3 to 4 years into, for maybe 5 years into my relationship with them, he and his wife adopted 2 brothers, both African-American boys, and is bringing them up in that city, that town. And Rob is actually the head baseball coach at the high school there now. And so we had this full circle thing where he coached my son for the last couple of years of his baseball playing career. But anyway, I bought 2 books, 2 of your books. One's right here, it's mine. And I bought another one and sent it to those boys. So thank you for all the work that you did.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It was a lot of fun to do, and it amazing. I mean, to me at least, I don't know if any of you all were familiar with these folks, but the stories and the people, it's really stunning to think, I'm a baseball guy. I've got a pretty good, you sit around, having a beer and kind of can talk about so many great players and stats, and I thought, how is it that we all have such a light understanding of some of these people? I'd heard of Josh Gibson, but I didn't think, in fact, I know I didn't fully understand the depth of his greatness, the stats behind it, and so many of the other folks too.
Speaking of the, Latin baseball, Josh Gibson was huge, literally and figuratively, in Puerto Rico and Mexico. According to Sean, he's still revered in Puerto Rico.
That's great.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, let's wrap it up. We've got our hour plus. Some of you guys might have work. I could chat to all of you for hours. This has been one of the best interviews I've done in a long time, and you both are absolutely fascinating. Ellen, I had a quick question for you. Since you lived in London for a while, what was the American thing you missed when you were over there?
I'm gonna say baseball. I'll just say baseball because we would come and see games when we came back to visit my parents. My cousin was a Mets season ticket holder at the time, and so every once in a while we'd still get to catch a game. I got to see one last game at Shea before they demolished it. But yeah, I don't know. I had spent a year in France when I was in college, and that was way more extreme in terms of not having exposure to American TV. Like on French TV, you don't see American shows really, you see French shows. Whereas in the UK, there's a lot of American stuff. Even though it still retains its own identity hugely. It's definitely, I think Americans think if you go to live in London, it'll be the same as living in New York. It's definitely not. So yeah, I miss baseball. It's really nice being able to play softball with my husband. It's nice to be able to go to games. I've missed it a lot this year. We go a lot to see the Mets play, even occasionally the Yankees. Although on the last time we went, Google Maps tried to kill us on the way home and led us up a raccoon-infested staircase, which I took as a hint I should never go to a Yankees game ever again.
You mentioned your Mets games, and I know you mentioned Herm on your Instagram there. We had Herm on. Herm's great. You guys should meet up with Herm.
I mean, Herm has talked me into doing the Coney Island polar bear plunge next year. So do you guys know what that is? It's basically, yep. I'll explain it just for our listeners who may not know what it is. It's an annual event where crazy people, aka New Yorkers, run into the Atlantic Ocean on New Year's Day as a sort of like, hey guys, we're starting over thing. I mean, Herm is, okay, I told Herm I would do it if the Mets make the playoffs. So we can put a pin in that as well.
So we need to check back next season to find out. Yeah, because we call it the loony duck over here. So
what kind of crazy people exactly, Ellen?
Just self-selected. This is actually this image that's up is my Mets cutout from this year, because the Mets, like in Korean baseball and in some other major league teams, let fans put their cutouts in the stand. Although I really regret, I know a cartoonist who's fantastic named Josh Neufeld, and he's a huge Giants fan. He's a native New Yorker, but his family are like they were Giants fans before they left, and they just stayed with the team. And he drew his, and it was so cool. And afterwards, I felt like such a dimwit for not drawing mine. But this is my cutout, so.
That's a great opportunity for every artist in this community, is to take commissions to draw people's cardboard cutouts for next year, because we're sure as hell not going to be.
Oh, really? Oh, God. I was about to say, I hope it isn't necessary.
Okay. I don't know how it's not.
Things are really bad here, but I still hope it won't be necessary.
I don't think it will be necessary for the whole season, but I think
Yeah.
it will be necessary for a large chunk of this season.
Oh.
It's going to be better than last year, I think, but there's no way that everything sorts itself out enough by, will it be like, what is it, mid-late May or something like that? We're probably going to start.
No way.
So
I'm deluded. I mean, like, I barely know what day of the week it is, so I'm just going to continue that level of delusion up until, you know, the last possible moment.
So my other question for Brian before we go is, have you convinced the other owners to let you display your art up in the stadiums?
Not yet. No, it's funny. What they did do, and I didn't push them on it because I don't know. It just feels weird. Like they would, you know, are they doing it because they think it's good? Or are they doing it, you know, because they feel some kind of obligation? So I just kind of stay away from it. But what they did do, which I thought was really cool, was the guy who runs our team in Richmond sent out a blast to a bunch of the minor league teams about the Enshrine book and kind of told them what we were doing. And so a bunch of them took it. I said, look, guys, I can send you like 10, you know, in a batch if you sell them all. And it's tougher for them to sell right now because they were all going to put them in their team store, but all the team stores are all virtual right now. So they're just kind of hanging on to a bunch of them. But a bunch of teams did. The Bowie Bay Sox, the Fred Nats, that's the Fredericksburg Nationals, Augusta Green Jackets, Montgomery Biscuits, Omaha's got them, Richmond's got them. I'm trying to think. There's a couple other teams.
What about the Vermont Lake Monsters, who are officially my favorite minor? The Flying Squirrels and the Lake Monsters are really neck and neck for my favorite minor league team name. FYI.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that the support too. So no, I didn't hear from them, but you know, road is long, right? You never know. So, but Richmond's got a lot of street artists and muralists, and our ballpark is a giant concrete bunker, and it was built in 1984, I think. So we have a lot of great murals and things like that. So I'll pick my spots. You know, I'm going to probably try and do I do a lot of ballparks, major league ballparks, but I want to start getting into some of the minor league ones too, just because just something about looking at the buildings and, you know, framing them the right way. Something about it I love looking at, so I like making those.
Excellent. Okay, let's wrap it up there, Jason. Tad, before we go, what is the website for anyone who wants to know what we're talking about here tonight?
Sure, NLBMArt.com. We are in the process of kind of rebranding it because our handshake agreement with the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum expired on the 31st. So we have been using, they have granted us all of the artists use of the 100-year logo and the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum logos. So, we're free to, we're artists. We can do whatever we want in terms of how much we donate, when we donate, and to whom we donate. But what we're really trying to do now is build more of those relationships, hoping to have another call with Sean Gibson this week. I think you guys know I've been working really closely with the Buck Leonard Association. And so we're, the families, in light of the recent announcements, several of the families have come together in what Rose Hunter of the Buck Leonard Association calls a consortium of Negro Leagues families. And so they were going to be drafting a letter and sending that off as soon as yesterday to Major League Baseball. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the community of the Negro Leagues come together. And it's really fun and exciting to be part of that.
Indeed. And we will obviously keep tabs on the developments there with these webcasts. Ellen, where can anyone watching find you online?
Oh, wow. My website is littlewhitebird.com because literally no one can spell my last name. So I didn't think that was a good idea as a URL. So it's littlewhitebird.com, and that would be, you'll find links there to my Instagram, to my portfolio, to my comics, and also to my shop, where I'm selling Crankless Chronicle 2, And I'm giving half the proceeds to the initiative that Tad is running, because I am really excited about it. And thank you, Tad, for making me a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect. Brian, where can anyone watching find you online?
Instagram's the best place. That's where I post everything, and it's hockeycal_art. And that's where I kind of put everything that I'm doing.
And where can they buy Enshrined, the book? Is there a link there on the Instagram for that?
There's a Shopify link on there. It's hockeycal-art.myshopify.com. And he's got it pulled up right there on the screen. That's the actual Shopify website to purchase the book.
Excellent. Guys, thank you so very, very much for joining us tonight. We'll have to have you both back on individually to have a more long-form discussion about your careers and stuff. It's been very, very interesting to speak to you both, and an absolute pleasure. So once again, thank you, and have a great night. Well, it's around evening time, isn't it, where you both are?
Yeah.
It's past midnight for us, so we're all right.
Yes, it's a quarter after, as you Americans call it, a quarter after midnight in the UK. So we're gonna head off, and I'll probably listen to some Moby Dick.
You're gonna play some FIFA. I know you, John.
I'm listening to the audiobook of Moby Dick right now.
Oh, are you listening to the one where different celebrities read each chapter?
No, I didn't know that existed.
Oh, it's really good. It's like
that was
Stephen
the start
Fry
over
and all
again.
these like fabulous people.
you can go off, Jason. I'm going to sit and talk about Moby Dick for the next 6 hours.
You're gonna have to start over with this new audio version with the celebrities now.
It's the 1987 Frank Miller narrated version that I'm listening to, which is very good. So
We'll
far.
enjoy. It's a fabulous book.
It is.
Cool.
It's just too long to read.
All right. So before we go, I usually do, as Bubba on Baseball, I usually do a daily baseball and history fact, but I'm taking a break till the season starts there, and I'm doing card art. So I didn't get Sean Gibson's card done in time. So I'm going to show off my 2 favorite cards that I've done so far. And these are Jeff Kunkel card.
Yeah, and I know what that other one is.
The Steve Lake card with the bird on it. So, but as for each guest, I need to know your favorite player from the 80s and 90s so I can give you a card and send it you guys' way.
Oh my gosh.
Mookie, Dwight, I'm thinking.
Oh my God. Well, I mean, Brian, you have Lee Mazzilli of all people on your Insta bio. I mean, are you a Secret Roots fan?
Yeah, you know, that Lee Mazzilli was the first one I ever did where I was like, ooh, that looks pretty cool. And when I was setting up Instagram, I didn't even know it was going to happen. I just put it there, and then I'm too lazy to change it. But I'm a huge George Brett guy. George Brett was my, George Brett was my hero as a kid.
Oh my God, I was obsessed with
Yankees fan loves George Brett.
I know. Well, look, Thurman Munson died, right? Thurman Munson was my guy, and he unfortunately passed away, right? So then to an 8 or 9 year old, the guy who was just absolutely the greatest player on the earth, who would come and break our hearts every year, was George Brett, and he was kind of like a Derek Jeter for our generation. He was just kind of this, dynamic guy, and so I don't know how it came to be, but that was.
I think you made John's day. He's the big Thurman Munson fan.
Yeah, and it's worth remembering as well that the Yankees during a lot of that stretch weren't necessarily a winning team either. So I think that you might well have run into the same trouble that Jason did in his younger years. You've told the story before on the show, Jason, about following the A's and the Padres as much almost as you followed the Mariners, because there just wasn't like an interest there because of the product that they were putting out.
No,
what's that supposed to mean?
Hey, you
got my Rupert Jones release
so much.
I'm getting a lot of mixed messages here.
All right, so Ellen, who are we thinking? We going to go with Mookie? Lenny
Oh,
Dykstra?
well, I did name my cat after him, so yeah, let's go with Mookie. I mean, clearly,
Right.
I just mailed off a copy of Cranklets 1, which has the kind of iconic Game 6 1986 in one panel. And I had told this guy there was nothing bad about the Red Sox, and I forgot about that one panel. Sorry.
So I love
a lot of things bad about the Red Sox. It's unavoidable.
But he's actually it's his dad and his uncle at the same time, because Mookie's brother after got divorced or something like that. I can't know how it works, but yeah, they're the same guy's his dad and his uncle.
Watch out. There, but for the grace of God, go any of us.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show. We'll get in contact. You guys on each, because I think we could probably spend an hour chatting to you both, no problem at all. And you guys were absolutely a fantastic interview.
You guys are fantastic.
Agreed. Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks, guys.
Right.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
All right. Have a good night.